Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the One Fear Per Year podcast, where we talk about walking through fear and living our best lives. And today, my very special guest, I met him recently, actually, at the National Speakers Association conference called Influence. So, Matt Poepsel, thank you so much for joining me today.
Janice, thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Oh my goodness. So, Matt, first of all, I just want to say thank you so much for shipping me your book out of the kindness and generosity deep within your heart. Because we talked about this podcast, then you're like, hey, I want to send you my book. And I get your book. It's called Expand the Circle. And I start reading it. I'm not done yet, but let me just tell everybody who's listening, this book is amazing. When they talk about thought leadership and having ideas to share and twists on things that, looking at something a different way, that's what this book is. So I just want to say congratulations on a job well done.
Thank you, Janice. Really appreciate it. It means so much to me. You write a book and you never know what's going to happen. You just pour your heart into it and you just hope it can reach some people and you maybe make a connection. And I really appreciate that.
Yeah, well, and I know books are like babies. It's this birthing process. And so, were there any, speaking of fear, was there any fear for you involved in either writing or publishing or getting this work out into the world?
From day one, Janice, can you believe it? Day one, fear jumped right in there. So what happened was I committed to the process of writing a book. I said, you know what? I've always wanted to write a book. I had a podcast guest of mine on who had written a book, and I just offhandedly made the comment. I said, I think I might want to write a book someday. And he said, oh, yeah, you should totally write a book. Yeah, here's a program that I use to write my book. And everybody, kind of get some authors together. They work on their own thing. So I said, all right. So I was very interested. I'm like, I'm committed to writing a book, but I didn't really know what I was going to write about necessarily. And so the program director says, we got to be authentic. You have to write about something that's really important to you. And I said, oh no, I'm right. I'm going through a phase of my life where I'm really starting to connect Western psychology and leadership and business with my burgeoning meditation practice and Eastern philosophy. It's pretty weird in my head right now. And he said, well, that's too bad. If that's where you are, that's where you're going to write. And I was like, oh no. So here comes that fear. What are people going to think? I've never showed this side of myself. Are people going to accept me? All these stuff. Wait a second. You haven't even written your first page yet. Why are you going to defeat yourself before you even got started? So thankfully I was able to face those fears and really channel a lot of that energy into the book and my research and my guidance for other aspiring leaders. And I'm just so glad I did. I'm so glad I did. There's probably a time in my life when I wouldn't have done that. And I'm so glad I did.
Well, so you say using the fear, channeling the energy of the fear into something productive, which was writing the book. And I know you mentioned there was a group that you joined. So tell us a little bit about that part of it, because I know in my life, accountability and having groups and people around me it's monumental in doing things that are scary.
Yeah, and I think that's something I didn't really appreciate when I first started. I almost looked at the program and really the fact that it was very structured because I've never written a book before. So the way that program happened to work is that you would get a group of nonfiction authors together and everyone had their own concepts. And you would all learn together how to structure a story, how to conduct research, what goes into the publishing process, how to structure a manuscript. And these were all very useful things. So I really appreciated that I would get sort of the learning on a regular weekly basis, logging into a Zoom call and have a little bit of extra accountability to make sure you wrote your pages and everybody kind of moved forward in their own process, but all worked on their own book projects. What I didn't really appreciate at the time is the emotional journey and the fears that come in when people are like, I don't know if I'm ever going to get this done. Is anybody going to ever even buy this book? And all these kinds of things that happen. And I think that that's where the group and the cohort really had this emotional benefit as well. So their motto of never write alone is kind of it was very much appreciated when you're in the dark depths of your own mind, basically, of saying like you're sitting with yourself in isolation, tapping away on a keyboard. And it's just it's not a great place to be. So it's good to go through that with some other people.
Absolutely. And I think that's part of the reason I'm doing this podcast too, is to help myself walk through fear, because I'm encouraged every time I hear people's stories. And it's that emotional support, like, hey, you are not alone in this journey, and you might walk through one fear and then another presents itself, and just to have people around you to say, I know sometimes it just feels overwhelming, but you know what? You can do this. Just keep getting back up. So I super appreciate um, that point of view, and having people around us when we're going through life. I mean, in general.
Yeah.
And what was so cool when I'm reading your book, I haven't told you this, but I read about Tasha Eurich, who I brought up myself in my TEDx talk about kicking the people pleasing habit, because she talks about self-awareness. And tell us that statistic. Do you remember it from your book?
Yeah, I do. She says that 95% of us believe that we're self-aware, highly self-aware, accurately self-aware. But when put to the research, empirically, what she finds is that only 10 to 15% of us actually are. So her line was that that means that on a given day, 85% of us are lying to ourselves about whether we're lying to ourselves. And it's so true. Fast forward to today, I teach self-awareness in form of leadership, graduate level for leaders at Boston College, and I include some of those references to work like Tasha's. And it's just so true. It's so incredibly important to have self-awareness, but it's so hard fought. It's so hard to get accurate self-awareness. So I was really happy that she had conducted that research, and I wanted to include it in the book.
Absolutely, because as you say, and then in the talk I did too. So it was funny because you say there is assessment, which in my mind was kind of like that awareness concept, and then aspiration, expressing your intention to achieve something, and then there's the action. And for me, it was awareness, choice, and action were like the three things. But talk a little bit about that process of self-awareness, and then taking that assessment and really having intentionality behind doing something, and then the action.
Yeah, I think the assessment is a great place to start. Where do I want to go? What do I have working for me? What might be holding me back? Having accurate self-assessment of my resources, my capabilities, whatever it is. I think it's good just to take stock, occasionally reflect on that, whether you want to write a book or get a new job or find a romantic partner or write a great symphony. It doesn't matter. Like, that's part of the assessment phase, is like, where are we starting from, basically. But the intention starts to get really interesting. I think that there's so much great energy in intention. And whether you put that intention for a force of good or a force of not so good will dictate sort of the end product, so to speak. Like, why are you wanting to do this thing? If you're like, well, people have told me that I should. Ooh, not a lot of great energy going to come from that. Versus, my heart just tells me that if I don't do this, I'm going to regret it. Okay, that might be a little better, but still coming from a place of fear. Versus, I just feel called to do this. Those are the people that tend to have that massive store of energy they can tap into to see them through toward achieving a goal. Whether that's a mastery goal or a performance goal doesn't really matter so much, but it's like, where's this intention coming from? Is it outside of yourself, or is it inside? Is it aligned with your values, or is it not? Is it in service of others, ideally, or is it really serving something else, like what society might expect of us? I want to go for this job because, it'd be a real step up in pay. Does money matter to you that much? No, not really, but it's kind of how we keep score as a society. I wouldn't recommend it then. Like, of course, money's still going to be important, but like, maybe that's not the best motivation or intention to go get that new job, right? Versus, I've always wanted to increase my ability to be creative in my work. That's always been something really meaningful to me from the time I was a child. And now I have that opportunity with this new job. If I go on this career path, I'm liking that a lot better. Right? So that's where intention, I think, is really overlooked sometimes. Why do we do the things we do? Who will benefit? What impact will it leave in this world? What ripples will it send? The book cover that I chose was like, how do we send these ripples outward from us living our highest life without fear, or at least by respecting fear and converting it into energy, I feel like that's what the role that intentionality builds, that bridge between our assessment of where we are and our action that's going to get us to where we want to go.
Bam. I really, really like that. Now, I am so curious to know what prompted you on this path of the meditation, mindfulness, that type of the philosophy, maybe the Eastern, I think you had said the Buddhist kind of philosophy. How did that develop in your life?
Yeah, it was after decades of trying to be the highest possible achiever I could. I tried to earn all the different titles. So my professional life started off in the military, where I became a Marine. That was a very proud moment for me. Great, chalk it up. Later on in the corporate world, decided to pursue my PhD in psychology to study. Awesome. Found a long format race like Ironman, completed it. But on the other side of none of those was lasting happiness. It's almost like achievement became this bottomless pit that no matter what I did, it was never going to be full, right? And I almost just hit the limits of my own self-interest. And so during the pandemic, I was kind of like starting to show the signs of struggling a little bit, of falling out of love with work and with myself. And my father was diagnosed with kidney cancer. And he has since had surgery and he had a full recovery. So he's enjoying his retirement now, thankfully. But at the time, I was like, oh, that's right. We know how this movie ends. And so having a midlife crisis in the middle of a global pandemic, as it turned out, and then having this mortal sort of situation in my family, it just all was in my mind, swirling, set me, spiraling. And I decided to meditate, to pick up a practice I hadn't looked at for 15 plus years, and sit down and just be with my thoughts, and to allow myself to feel the fear and to just allow it to bubble up and not judge it and not resist it, but to really sort of, just incorporate it almost and just dissolve into it. And it wasn't all just fear. Some of it was confusion and intention and positivity. I was always just kind of like, I just wasn't quite there. And I'm so glad I did. But the one thing I'll tell you, Janice, I'm just absolutely terrible at meditation. I just can't stop thinking about work. So I had all these Eastern ideals in my mind that I was trying to be, and this is probably breaking meditation to try to be good at it. But at the same time, I started looking at Western leadership through this Eastern lens and realizing two things. One is that it's the most natural way we can approach leadership if we do it from a selfless perspective. When we care more about the mission, about other people and their welfare and their contribution toward a collective goal, we're naturally going to be taken care of. So we don't have to worry about fear if we're coming from a place of service. That's one thing. The second is that when you look at post-pandemic workers, Gen Z workers, now remote and hybrid workers, post-AI workers, they're hungry for something that's more unified than ever. And right now, I feel like this enlightened leadership approach that I've kind of stumbled upon and fell backward into actually might have, ironically, the right sort of destination for us when it comes to the future of leadership, even though it's inspired by, 5,000-year-old meditation practice.
Yes. And maybe not even though, but because it's inspired by that. And part of my transformation was walking into a yoga class, and I was always into, racket sports or like whatever. It was very active, something for me to hit, sport. And so I'm thinking, oh my gosh, how boring, how whatever. But I was going through a divorce and a hard moment in my life. And I remember as I did the breath to movement and got into my body, it felt like coming home almost to myself. Like I had been so dissociated with myself.
Great word. Great word. I hear that a lot. I hear dissociated. I hear hollow. I hear fractured. And these things are basically what happens when we're not whole. And so wholeness and unified and all these things is the antithesis or the opposite of what fear does. In my experience, fear is what drives things apart. It drives a wedge between things, whether it's people, whether it's just all kinds of, sometimes between ourselves or what we believe to be our true self and the life we're living. You wake up and you're like, huh, I don't even recognize myself when I look in the mirror. That's what fear can do. And I always find, and I say this in the book too, that the opposite of fear isn't courage, it's love. Love and unity and connection and being intrinsically whole and recognizing that we are whole, that we couldn't possibly be broken, if we're willing to go to that depth, is so liberating, right? It just removes those barriers that we erect for ourselves. We imprison ourselves. And that was a very powerful lesson to learn, but also one that carries a lot of accountability, because it means that we're chiefly responsible for not overcoming our fear, but allowing that fear, right? And also, not being beholden to it, but seeking that unity and that wholeness that's ours for the taking.
Yes, so well said. And you even knew the final question that I was going to ask, which is, what is the opposite of fear for you? And love is such a good one.
But let me say something about that, Janice. So I mentioned it earlier. I'm a former Marine, right? This is not what we talk about. I'm an executive. We don't walk into board meetings and talk about love. It's like a rough and tumble kind of person. And the reality is that when you look a little deeper, though, and you start to realize that whether you're talking about something like in the Marine Corps, as an example, we preach physical fitness, mental fitness, and spiritual fitness. And that last one, nobody ever thinks about or talks about. But it's been there forever, because they know they're very good at what they do, and they know that's required for a whole person approach to, in their case, their business that they're in. And it's just increasingly true when you start looking at these the newest generations to enter the workplace, the post-pandemic worker who says, my values have been reprioritized, and yes, I still want to work, but that's not all I want to do anymore. And I feel like it comes from an unusual place, and it makes people a little uncomfortable. Love is a 4-letter word after all. But I think it's one of those things that we've got to wake up and be willing to go there. And especially when we define love as that type of connection, that intense unity, and that feeling of togetherness, that collectivism that we really need in a world moving forward that's demanding us to be more collaborative and innovative and dynamic and fast-paced. You can't do those things without love, Janice. And so, as much as it might be hard to hear in certain circles, and it's not always popular when I say it. I had somebody say, stop saying that, you're going to get us sued. And I thought, you get sued by love? I mean, oh my goodness, we've got a lot of work to do. But eventually they say, you know what, you're right. You're right. So I think that it's going to take a lot of time. It may not happen in my lifetime, but I think that a return to the intense togetherness, the unity, this notion of how do we bring love in as a way to dispel that fear, I think that's what it's going to take.
Last question. How do people who want to tap into their spirituality and really want to start exploring that, but have no idea where to start, what would you say are some practical tips and things that they can do?
Yeah, I'd say that, first of all, if we have any sort of a reaction to that word, it can be a loaded word depending on your background and your current context and environment, is desensitize the word. And the reality is that if you like to take walks in nature, if you like to listen to music, let's just use the word spiritual and say those can be spiritual experiences. Anything that helps you to feel that sense of intense presence and connection to something bigger than yourself, we'll just call that. It could be a form of religion. It could be whatever you want, but let's just talk about it. Let's just kind of open up the term of spirituality to be however the individual defines it. If you say at that point, I'm not sure what that is, I think slow down, quiet down, right? Pay attention. Look for those times when you get lost in something. My morning routine now, I wake up every day at 4:30 in the morning, which means I don't stay up late anymore, quit drinking, all that stuff, because I love, love, love my mornings. I sit quietly. I do a little bit of reading. I do a little bit of meditation. Like, I love the presence and the peace of the morning. It's when I have really great energy. So I discovered that after many years of not living like that, right? So I think that when we slow down and we quiet down and we see what shows up for us, we pay attention to, like, when do I feel a connection? And otherwise just get exposed to as many different people, ask questions, be curious with yourself to try to find your spiritual path. It's the one that'll lead you away from your own self-interest and more towards connecting with things that are bigger and deeper and truer. And I think that once, you'll find those clues and then just kind of lean into it. That's the best advice that I can give.
I would just say to that, amen. Matt, you have just been an amazing guest. I really could talk to you for hours and hours. You are living the life that you were meant to live. And so I just want to say, good job on following that inner calling and showing up and being intentional, doing the work, sending me this book, writing the book, being on my podcast, and just for light rippling out to everybody around you, the work that you've done. It's seen, it's felt and appreciated. And everybody go out and hug a tree, find your unique path, your unique spiritual path, and really just live that best, your fullest, brightest, most aligned life. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you, Janice.